The forest was burning. Flames tore through the trees like hungry beasts, turning pine needles to ash and silence to screams. Wildlife scattered in every direction, but one mother bear ran toward the danger. Not to escape, but to protect. She had 2 tiny cubs trapped between a fallen tree and fire. She fought through smoke, claws scorched, fur singed, and curled her body around them, shielding them with her final breath. By morning, all that remained was smoke, 2 frightened cubs, and her still body. That's when he found them. A man who had once vowed never to get involved again. A man with scars deeper than the forest's roots. He didn't come to rescue anyone. But what he saw changed everything. What he did next would not only save the cubs. It would rewrite the story of a mother's sacrifice. The air had been drying for weeks. The kind of dry where pine needles snapped underfoot like brittle glass, and even the moss crackled when touched. Black Hollow Forest, a vast and ancient woodland, had seen droughts before, but not like this. When the lightning struck the ridge, it took only minutes for smoke to rise. By dawn, fire crawled through the trees like a predator set loose. Animals ran. Birds vanished. Even the wind seemed to flee. And in the middle of it all, a mother bear ran not away, but toward the flame. Her 2 cubs, still wobbling and new to the world, had been left under the shelter of a low outcropping while she foraged. But the fire split the forest between them before she could return. She didn't hesitate. She charged through smoke and heat and falling embers, roaring through the burning underbrush. When she reached them, the cubs were crying. The fire had surrounded their tiny space. One paw was already scorched. But she did what only a mother could do. She stood tall, wrapped her body around them, and made herself a shield. When the sun rose again, the fire had moved on, pushed east by the wind, deeper into the valley. But where the cubs had been, there was only smoldering ash and blackened earth. And a shape. Charred. Motionless. But behind that lifeless body, something moved. 2 cubs. Covered in ash. Trembling. Alive. They had survived. Because she hadn't let go. Caleb Rowan had left the world 3 years ago. A firefighter once decorated for bravery, he'd watched a mistake take the life of his partner during a wildfire near Flagstaff. Since then, he hadn't fought a single flame. He hadn't set foot in a city. He'd retreated into Black Hollow with a backpack, an axe, and a guilt he couldn't bury. When the fire touched his part of the forest, he didn't run. He watched. And when the smoke cleared, he walked the edge of the burn, checking for injured animals, half out of habit, half from some sense of responsibility he refused to admit still existed. That's when he saw the body. And then, the cubs. They were tiny. Shaking. One had a burn on its ear. The other was whimpering, nudging its mother's unmoving head. Her black fur was seared, but her eyes were closed as if in sleep. Caleb froze. This was nature, wasn't it? The wild doing what it always did. He wasn't supposed to interfere. That's why he had come here, to stop saving, to stop failing. But when the smaller cub cried out, a sound so eerily like a child's sob, Caleb dropped to one knee. "God help me," he muttered. "Not again." He removed his jacket and laid it gently over the cubs. They didn't run. They just leaned into him. And with that, Caleb knew he wasn't walking away. Caleb carried the cubs wrapped in his jacket, one under each arm, their small bodies trembling against him. The air still reeked of burnt sap and scorched earth, and each step stirred up black soot that clung to his boots. The mother's body faded behind him in the smoke. He never looked back. His cabin sat on the far side of Black Hollow, a modest one-room structure with a tin roof, a wood stove, and not much else. It had been his retreat, his prison, and his penance all at once. Now, it was a refuge. He laid the cubs down gently on a bed of wool blankets near the fire. One whimpered. The other let out a short growl, not threatening, just confused. Frightened. "You are okay," Caleb whispered, kneeling beside them. "You are safe now." But were they? The smaller cub, the one with the burnt ear, winced when Caleb touched its paw. "That is a burn," he murmured. "You poor thing." He rummaged through his pack for his emergency kit. Antiseptic. Gauze. Gloves. He'd used these same supplies on men burned in battle with flames, not expecting he'd one day use them on bear cubs. The cubs did not fight. They were too exhausted. Too young. As he cleaned the wound, memories bled in. You saved everyone but one, his captain had told him, the day after the Flagstaff blaze. One man died. That is not failure, Caleb. But Caleb had not believed it. Still did not. But these cubs, they were not ghosts. Not yet. He would not fail them. That night, the fire crackled quietly as Caleb sat up in his chair, watching the cubs sleep. The smaller one curled against its sibling, twitching in a dream. Occasionally, one would let out a soft cry, and he'd lean closer, whispering until they calmed. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. His hands still smelled of smoke. His chest still held that tightening weight, the one that told him this wasn't over. That danger had not passed. And he was right. At dawn, Caleb stepped outside to gather more firewood. The forest was eerily silent, no birdsong, no rustle of wind. Just stillness. And that's when he saw the tracks. Not his. Not bare. Boot prints. Fresh. Heading toward the burn site, and then looping back toward his cabin. He froze. Hunters? Rangers? Poachers? He scanned the tree line, and there just for a moment he saw it. A flash of movement. A figure. Someone had been watching him. And now they knew he had the cubs. Back inside, Caleb sealed the door and checked the rifle resting on his wall. He had not fired it in over a year. But now his instincts, the ones he had buried under guilt, began to surface. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered to the cubs. "I promised your mother, did not I? Even if she never asked." Outside, the wind picked up. And far beyond the trees, someone began moving closer. The next morning, Caleb was ready. He had not lived in the forest for 3 years without learning how to read it. The tracks that circled the cabin weren't random. Someone had been scoping him out. Watching. Measuring how close they could get before he had notice. And they were not alone. 2 sets of prints. One heavier. One lighter. Broad tread. Military surplus boots. He checked his trail cameras, solar-powered, camouflaged, set up months ago out of habit more than fear. On the card, footage of 2 men, rifles slung over their shoulders, scanning the edge of the burn zone. Not firefighters. Not rescue. Poachers. Black Hollow had always attracted the worst when fires cleared the land. After every wildfire, scavengers would come, pretending to help with cleanup, when really, they were tracking injured wildlife. Cubs without mothers. Limps. Weakness. Bears brought a high price on the black market. Even higher alive. Exotic animal collectors. Trophy traffickers. Even underground zoos. Caleb knew the type. He used to fight their kind. Report them. Track them. Until everything went to hell and he stopped caring. But now, he cared again. He could not stay in the cabin. If they were watching, it was only a matter of time before they broke in, and they would not be gentle. The cubs couldn't survive capture. One of them was still limping, recovering. They wouldn't survive a cage. He needed to move them. Somewhere far. Safe. There was an old ranger station 15 miles west, decommissioned, forgotten by the system. Off the grid, buried beneath ridgelines and rocks. He had supplies stashed there. First aid. Gear. It was a long shot. But it was all he had. That evening, Caleb loaded the cubs into a reinforced canvas sled. He wrapped them in blankets, strapped them down gently, whispered softly as they watched him with eyes that no longer feared him. "Just one more trip," he said. "Then you will be okay." He packed his rifle. A flare. His father's old hunting knife. And they left under the cover of fading light. They had not made it a mile before the first gunshot cracked through the trees. Caleb dropped instantly, shielding the sled. The cubs whimpered. From behind a line of pine trees, a voice called out. "Just give me up, friend. You can walk away. This is not personal." Caleb's voice was low. Steady. You do not get to say that after pulling a trigger. He fired once, not to hit, but to drive them back. It worked. Silence fell again. And then snow. Soft flakes, drifting from the darkening sky, covering the trail. Covering their path. It was the first break they needed. For hours, Caleb dragged the sled over rocks and roots, through thickets, past ridgelines. His leg burned. His lungs fought the cold. But he did not stop. Behind him, he heard no more shots. Just wind. And breath. And two tiny lives counting on him. It was nearly dawn when Caleb reached the ranger station. The old cabin looked smaller than he remembered, weathered by wind, half swallowed by brush. One window was cracked. The roof sagged. But the stone fireplace still stood strong, and the walls, blessedly, held out the cold. He lit a fire from old birch bark and pine resin. The cubs curled up near the heat, their eyes drooping, small bodies twitching in exhaustion. One reached out and grabbed his coat sleeve with a paw before falling asleep. "I have got you," he whispered. "You are safe. Just sleep." But he did not sleep. He rigged tripwires with old cans and fishing line. Set bear spray traps. Checked the rifle. Checked it again. Because he knew what men like those poachers were capable of. And he knew they weren't done yet. The old ranger radio in the cabin still worked. Just barely. Static crackled as Caleb twisted the dial, searching for anything beyond silence. Then a voice came through, distant but clear. "Park Service units are searching the burn zone. Reports of injured wildlife being tracked by illegal hunters. Locals advised to stay out of the Black Hollow perimeter." Caleb froze. They weren't just two random scavengers. They were part of a network. At sunset, the tripwire near the creek snapped. The metal cans clanged like a scream. Caleb ran out with the rifle. No shot. No voices. Just footprints. Less than 2 hours old. Circling the back of the station. Watching. Waiting. And then gone again. They knew where he was. They were trying to spook him. And they were close. That night, while Caleb boiled snow for water and kept watch at the door, a sound pulled him upright. A tiny whimper. A paw dragging on the floor. Bran, the stronger cub, wasn't moving right. He limped across the wood, stumbled once, then collapsed beside Ash. Caleb rushed over. The cub was breathing. But shallow. Irregular. Dehydrated. Feverish. The journey had cost him more than Caleb thought. No, not now. He opened the kit. Gave him water. Checked his paw. No injuries. Just exhaustion. And maybe something worse. They needed help. Real help. And soon. Caleb looked at the cub. Then at the rifle. Then at the moonlight casting long shadows across the floor. "I can't do this alone anymore," he said aloud. So he made a choice. He opened the radio line again. "And for the first time in 3 years," he said, "this is Caleb Rowan. Former Flagstaff firefighter. I have 2 surviving bear cubs from Black Hollow. They're alive. But one's fading fast. I need extraction. Now." A pause. Then a voice replied. "We hear you. Hold your position." The rescue team said 4 hours. Caleb knew they might not have that long. Bran's breathing was shallow. Ash wouldn't leave his side, nudging him, licking his paw, crying quietly like a child begging for someone to wake up. Caleb had seen that kind of grief before. In his own reflection. In every sleepless night since the accident in Flagstaff. He stoked the fire. Sat by the window. Kept the rifle close. Outside, the snow had stopped. And the men returned. 2 figures emerged from the tree line. No more sneaking. No more watching. Just bold, steady movement toward the station with rifles drawn and bad intentions leaking off their boots. Caleb stepped onto the porch, hand steady, weapon raised. "Last warning," he called. "Walk away." One of them, older, scarred, laughed. "You are outnumbered. Not outwilled." They lifted their weapons. So did he. But before a shot could fire, a deafening sound ripped through the trees. The chopper's floodlight blinded the clearing. A voice shouted through a speaker. "Drop your weapons. Park Service enforcement. Hands up." The poachers ran. But they did not get far. Rangers burst from the trees like ghosts in uniforms, taking both men down within seconds. No shots fired. No one hurt. Just 2 monsters finally caged. Inside the cabin, paramedics checked the cubs immediately. Bran was dehydrated but alive. Ash wouldn't leave his side, even when they tried to lift him. Caleb stood to the side, bloodshot eyes watching. "You coming with us?" a ranger asked. Caleb looked at the cubs, then at the woods beyond. "No," he said quietly. "My part's done. They will miss you." He nodded once. "So will I." The cubs were taken to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center 2 states away. They grew strong, wild, beautiful. Months later, Bran and Ash were released into a protected forest, monitored but free. Rangers reported they never strayed far from each other. Always side by side. Always together. Just as their mother had left them. And just as one man had kept them. At the edge of Black Hollow, near the old ranger station, someone carved a message into a tree beside a scorched clearing. She gave her life to protect them. He gave his to let them live.